Good afternoon. My name is Tom Hall. I'm the director of the Sarasota Film Festival. Thank you for coming to the third in our conversation series this year with Griffin Dunne. We're so excited to have Griffin here with his film, The Discoverers. Before I bring our moderator and guest onto the stage, a few housekeeping announcements. Quickly, I want to thank our sponsors, the Longboat Key Club and Resort, the Amicus Foundation, the Familio Family Foundation, Wild Lexus of Sarasota, and the Regal Entertainment Group for their sponsorship. We're a nonprofit arts organization here in town, and we could not do this without our sponsors and our guests like you and our audience, so thank you all for coming and supporting the festival. I also want to thank Sarasota Magazine, who are, of course, a sponsor of their conversation series this year. They've been supporters for many, many years, and we greatly appreciate their support of this series. It's very important to us, so thank you for doing that. I also wanted to let you all know that we've got 2 days left one day after today, and there's plenty of movies to see, so we hope to see you at films here throughout the festival. So I hope you continue to come to the films and enjoy the festival. So please welcome our moderator today from the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Steve Dollar. And of course, our guest of honor, I remember seeing, I was way too young to be watching An American Werewolf in London, but I was watching it anyway because my parents were out playing bridge and I had a really good video store down the street. And it's an amazing movie. It introduced us to Griffin Dunne, or to me and my family anyway. And of course, After Hours and his work as a director, Practical Magic, and some of the films that he's done, he's been a real inspiration for a lot of folks. He's an incredible performer. He's an incredible director. He's done so many things in the film industry, and we're so honored to have him here as our guest, Griffin Dunne. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Cameras away. Enjoy the conversation.
Let's see. Everybody can hear me okay? Great.
And me,
Great.
yeah.
Well, Griffin, I spent the morning combing through IMDb trying to come up with this whole composite timeline. But I guess the best place to start would be your childhood, which I think was much more interesting than many childhood perhaps.
My parents, I was born in New York City, and my father became a writer years later, Dominic Dunne. At that time, he was a stage manager for live television, and he did the Howdy Doody show, and make sure that Howdy got on the table, and and then he worked for Playhouse 90. So he ended up working with everyone from Humphrey Bogart to Paul Newman and Arthur Penn and all the all the great early directors who became so prominent years later in movies in the 70s. And he's very taken with that kind of life, and got a job to be in television in Los Angeles. So we moved when I was about 2 years old from New York, and moved into this house that actually on Santa Monica, it used to be belonged to Harold Lloyd, and next door was where the Orson Welles had his not Orson Welles, who really is Citizen Kane. Hearst had his house next door that he built for Marion Davies. So it was that was sort of a precursor to the kind of life that my parents would lead. So they were very social and gave these parties not for television people, they all seemed to be movie people, some of the great stars of the 40s and 50s, and were constant guests at our house. We were really young, and my brother and sister and I. In fact, the bigger the party, they'd sort of and it was a school night. They'd check us into a hotel, and we would stand there in the lobby in our pajamas and our nurse. And but at that time, I guess as I got older, I kind of didn't want to be in the film business. Didn't want to be in television. I found it, phony and all that, which is, what kids do. They grow up to want to do the opposite. And when I went to high school, I didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to be a journalist, a writer, but I got talked into doing a play. It was Edward Albee's play Zoo Story, and I just fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. Became an actor. Got myself kicked out of high school.
So what was your high school?
It was called Fountain Valley. It was a boys' boarding school.
Oh, okay.
I seemed to only go to boys' boarding school from the time I was 11, which was odd. But I became an actor, and I moved to New York shortly after mm-hmm. getting drummed out of school, and planned to be a theater actor, but it turned out I ended up in movies anyway.
Yeah. I was wondering about that because being surrounded by all that from a young age, and perhaps feeling cynical about it, or seeing through these adults who were sort of legends to everybody else, but to you it was
yeah, to me they were just sort of like drunk grown-ups.
Right.
But I wish I had a little time machine and could have gone back, mm-hmm. even if I was a little kid, and just talk to George Cukor, and I wish I knew who I was
right.
making fun of. When I think about it, my dad was a collector of scrapbooks and invitations and to the parties that they were invited to, and the list of people were really incredible. Mm-hmm. And it would have been. I wish I knew as much about films, and could have taken advantage of it. When I flipped through these scrapbooks of his, I go, oh my God, that from Orson Welles to George Stevens, the director, to Sean Connery, it just went on and on and on. The only one I did know was Sean Connery, mm-hmm. And I was. He came to our house, and we were all swimming in the pool, or I wasn't. I actually didn't know how to swim, or I was taking swimming lessons. Mm-hmm. But that was James Bond in the pool. And it was very important to me to impress him. So I swam, got about 5 feet and sunk like a rock. And James Bond lifted me up, picked me up by my butt, put me up onto the thing and went, let's not do that quite so soon, laddie.
That's great. But you probably had some interesting neighbors. I mean, were your childhood friends of note?
Yeah, James Mason's son was mm-hmm. was one of my best friends, and Debbie Reynolds' daughter was my best friend, and we were we all had this little band. It wasn't like everybody was the son of somebody, but most mm-hmm. of the people that I knew were all in the business, and Jack Palant's son was like our best friend, and then we all had strange names like Griffin, and Jack Palance's son was named Cody, and Howard Keel's son was named Gunner. So I mean, so we were Griffin, Gunner, and Cody.
Could be a law firm or an outlaw band.
Some kind of
bank robbers. Well, with all that, I mean, it would have seemed very natural to go into show business, but I mean, was your resistance to it? Did your father think that was strange? Like, did he expect you to, go into the family?
No. In fact, he had become he had moved from television to directing mm-hmm. To producing movies, mm-hmm. and he produced Boys in the Band. And Panic in Needle Park, which is Al Pacino's first movie, and a film called And Play It As It Lays, which was written by my aunt and uncle, John Gregory Dunne and Joan Didion. And so he'd been doing that, but and at that point, that was right around the time I was in high school getting interested in acting. Mm-hmm. And sometime after that, he did another picture, and he got blacklisted for nothing political, purely social, and was unhireable, and ended up moving to Oregon because he'd lost all his money, and he'd gone, he had a drinking problem, and he just went to sober up and sort of start over and find himself. And that was when I decided to get into that business. So it was always, I saw how terrible it treated him.
Yeah.
So I kind of started it. That's also why I wanted to start it in New York. There was no history, there was no bad karma. My dad, even if he wanted to help me, which he would have, of course, but he was of no help, and he was actually, in a really bad place in his life. And so I always thought about Hollywood being a place where if you don't, do the right thing, or if you displease people, they will turn on you. And which is all the more reason I want to stay in New York and be in theater.
Yeah, yeah. But what was it like in New York when you got there? I mean, it's like 1974 maybe?
74.
Yeah.
Really strong theater scene. Joseph Papp's New York Shakespeare Festival was like the best, and you'd see all these unknown actors like Chris Walken, and and Pacino was relatively new, and he was on off Broadway all the time, and in Indian Wants the Bronx, and John Cazale was there. Meryl Streep had just graduated from Yale, and she was in plays all the time, and they were all like people going, "Oh my God, that Meryl Streep girl is really so good. I think she's going to do very well." So there were people like that everywhere.
Yeah. Well, we also coincided with the great Renaissance in American filmmaking, and
absolutely. I mean, I think still the greatest
Yeah.
films ever were made during that period.
So that must have been a pretty heady thing for an 18-year-old dropping in the middle of.
Well, and I it's not like I got anywhere close to that.
Yeah, yeah. It was set a high bar, though. I think.
Was a very, yes, exactly. I mean, it was all, and it was also a different, it was a time where actors didn't promote movies, and they were all, there was such a sort of an angry, artistic, rebellious thing that kind of doesn't really play now. Now you really have to, if you do something, you have to go out and promote it and stand by it, and you make a certain commitment, and it's sort of just the way the world works. But there were, these figures of, the kind of actors, that, and the kind of movies that were being made that were just so fresh. I wanted so badly to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It took me a while before I was, and by the time I was, it was the 80s, which was, I think, a decline in filmmaking. But it was certainly, an incredible time to be around. Carrie Fisher, who was Debbie Reynolds' daughter, was in Shampoo, so I got to see a lot of the making of that. They were just great movies then.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you, it's almost like you got into acting and producing almost at the same time.
Well, yeah, it turned out that way because I was, the other thing I was dyslexic, quite badly dyslexic, and I would, so auditioning was really difficult for me. I was a terrible auditioner. I'd be fine if I got the part, but I could never get the part from auditioning. It was just very hard for me to read off the page. And the words would go in reverse, and and if I memorized something, I'd need lots and lots of time, and you never have lots of time when you have an interview. So my two best friends were Mark Metcalf and Amy Robinson, and they were a bit more successful than I was a lot more successful than I was as an actor. Amy was in Mean Streets. She was the Italian girl in Mean Streets. And Mark was doing theater and in all those kind of great plays that Joseph Papp was doing. And the three of us loved this writer named Ann Beattie. And we also hated feeling so helpless of, from audition to audition, and did I get it? And it's always it is personal. You know, it's like we don't like you. It's not even you. We don't even like your face. You know, and so you know, it was always debilitating. We wanted to have some control of some kind. So we read this book, and it was Anne's first book, and we decided to produce it. And we had no idea how to produce it. And we found out that she taught at Harvard English. So we got in the car. One of the two of them had a car. We drove to Cambridge, and she was listed in the phone book. And we called and asked if we can come over. And she let these 3 strangers in. She later just said it was like 3 characters from her book, just walked into her living room. And we spent all afternoon talking about the book, drinking quite a bit, and kind of drunk. She gave us the option to her book. I remember she called up her agent to say she'd already agreed to this, who was there, and she was a little slurry, and she said, "These kids are really great, and they're going to do a great movie." And this agent was, his name was H.L. Swanson. You know, they call him Swanee. He was like one of the great old-time literary movie agents. And I could hear him yelling through the phone at her, but she stuck to her word. She said, "All I want to do is wear a beehive hairdo and be a waitress." So we ended up making that movie. It was called Chilly Scenes of Winter, and
it was a great ensemble.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It was Gloria Graham's last movie, and John Hurd and Mary Beth Hurt and all these Peter Riegert, and everybody sort of starting in their careers. And I gave myself a kind of small little part that got really big laughs, and people saw that, and then I ended up working at the Shakespeare Festival as an actor. But it wasn't, up until that point, I still had never gotten a job by reading or auditioning. It just wasn't in the cards for me.
It's interesting how that scenario kind of continues to replay itself every generation with a new crew of people who just decide, you know,
yeah,
well, we're just going to do it ourselves.
We're just going to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, I think at the time we sort of thought we were the only ones, and the people in our circle, we really were the only people who had actually ever produced movies with, you know, this was directed by Joan Micklin Silver, who had done Hester Street and was very, very prominent director. But you know, other actors, Kirk Douglas, actors had always been producing before us, but we weren't aware of that. But in our world, we were the only ones that had done that.
Right. But I mean, also at that time, I mean, that was sort of the beginning of what people would now call indies. You know,
That's true.
Which this
That's
festival
right.
is all about.
Yes, exactly right. It was truly an independent film, even though a studio financed it. It was, which was United Artists, and United Artists, you know, has had a reputation for letting filmmakers, you know, Woody Allen was there, and all the great movies and directors were coming out of United Artists, and a movie that they were incredibly proud of, that they hadn't seen yet, but took up so much of their time that they left us alone, was Heaven's Gate. And and they would always go, you know, they'd see our dailies, and all they wanted to talk about was how brilliant Heaven's Gate was. And even though they hadn't seen it. So we always felt a little competitive with this movie. But ours was a fraction of the cost. You know, I think our movie was, I don't think United Artists had ever made such a small movie. It was $2.5 million. The irony is now that's a pretty good sized budget, you know, for an independent movie. So we, you know, we made that movie, but it was really a burgeoning, very early. It was the start of like the cinema houses, like early Miramax and Cinecom, and there were these companies that were going to specialize in American films, the way Europeans have been doing it forever. But they had specialty. It was like specialty distribution companies.
Well, now, I mean, Chilly Scenes of Winter was I remember seeing it, and it was definitely more of an art house.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But then that led to something that became very mainstream, American Werewolf.
Oh, yes, yeah, but oddly enough, it didn't.
There wasn't a direct
lead. There was no connection, except that I guess I got a reputation as an actor that people would talk about me as an actor. I think because I also produced, and it was so unusual. It could work just as much against me too. It would be like, oh, he's going to be a guy who's going to come and tell us how to make a movie, and who wants to hire him. And that really was never my personality. But when I met John Landis for American Werewolf, he didn't know anything about me. And I didn't read the script because it was so closely guarded. And I talked to him for about 15 minutes. I keep waiting for him to hand me a script to cold read, which I knew I was going to flop. And and he said, "Great, nice to meet you." I went, "Okay, well, fuck it." And I get home, and John Landis calls me up directly, and he says, "So do you want to read the script?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Because I want you to play and look at this part, and that's what I want you to play, the role of Jack." And he goes, "I'm sending somebody to your apartment, and he's going to stand outside your apartment door, and if you could just read it right away and then call me." I had nothing going on. I waited for this guy. A guy, he looked like kind of a Brinks guard, handed me the script, stood outside my apartment door, and I read it. And it was hilarious. I said I'd love to do it. And I'd never, outside of that Chilly Scenes of Winter thing, I'd never been in a movie before. So, and it was the lead. It was like me and David. So we, next thing I knew, I was, flown to California for. Oh, the only thing he kept saying was, and he said in the interview was, "Are you claustrophobic?" And I said, "No." And even if I was, I would have said yes. I mean, the other way around. And but I thought it was a movie about people trapped in an elevator. That was the only clue I had. But what he meant was, when I went to California, they put plaster over your entire head and put 2 straws in your nose, and you stay like that until the plaster hardens. And it is quite alarming, actually. You got to stay very calm. But that's when I met Rick Baker, the great makeup artist, who I would spend many hours with. Soon we were then flown to London and by Concorde, and paid all this money, and I would be in makeup from. If I had to be on the set at like 8 in the morning, I'd have to be in the dressing room at 4. It would take hours to put this on. And it was itchy and hot and really disturbing to look at for me. And people, who were on the movie kept wanting to take me out to pubs, to scare people and stuff. And I couldn't bring myself to do that. I thought somebody would have a heart attack.
Is it, what's the trick of acting with all that stuff, especially doing comedy?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I could tell. I think the worse I looked, the funnier I could be. It was like it gave me something to really play off. And I knew it looked bad, so I didn't have to play the dark keys. I knew it would. By playing it lighter and more irreverent and off the cuff, it would have much more power than to play something that was in tandem with the way I looked.
Because it was almost like the character is still the same guy. It's just his face is.
Absolutely, and that became kind of a thing of mine, both as an actor and a director. Of, say if there was something like Addicted to Love, which I was directing, on the page, it read as these 2 deeply disturbed people. But if I had the 2 deeply disturbed people be really funny and really nice and kind of upbeat, then it would, the dark and the light would sort of meet, and it's true for a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, how did the success of that film affect you at all, or?
I was told over and over again. Reminded it was a real disappointment, box office wise.
I've forgotten that.
Yeah, and everybody thinks it's a hit, but it didn't really become a hit, and then a cult hit until a bit later, because it was very poorly reviewed. The idea of having humor and horror was so confusing to critics. They just found that so it's just not done. And of course, it set the tone for, you know, Ghostbusters, and I mean, you kind of can't see a horror movie now without there being, you know, some sly jokes in it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
the Zomcom.
Yeah, yeah. And but I don't know why people critically found it, were offended by that, and it's so bizarre. But anyway, so it didn't do as well. Also, his previous movie was Animal House, so it was all compared to Animal House. So it really didn't. It didn't change my life that much in a way I was particularly aware of. I wasn't inundated with scripts or stuff like that, and I mean, I wasn't depressed about it. It wasn't, you know, I was still very naive, where whatever I was working on, it was what I loved the most, you know. So I think I did theater afterwards, and
you produced another movie with John Sayles.
And I produced a movie with John Sayles that Amy Robinson and I did. So it was the first time I got a lot of fan mail. That I did. There were real kids who really loved it, and I tried to answer everyone with a letter, you know, like long thing, and I'm working on it, and then my hand gave out. But it was, you know, it was good.
Yeah. I was kind of reading up a little bit too. After Hours was actually voted by Time Out New York as like the #3 best New York City movie ever made.
I agree.
I think behind Sweet Smell of Success and Do the Right Thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So we beat Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, I mean, that movie seems to hold a long shadow of, I mean, it was certainly a long half-life of popularity. It definitely is.
It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. But there's an interesting story behind that, because it really, Scorsese wasn't necessarily in a real advantageous place for himself at the time, was he?
No, in fact, just the opposite. He'd made King of Comedy, which on reflection is a, you know, people are now acknowledged as being such a great movie. And I saw it recently. It is so disturbing. So many sick, twisted, celebrity-oriented crimes and delusional things have become almost commonplace. That when you see this, which is kind of a fresh idea, you can't. The De Niro character, Rupert Pupkin, you can hardly look at him. I mean, it's really like, it's so discomforting. But he had just finished this movie, which was financially a flop, and was, you know, kind of in bad, you know, in the doghouse, and he was in Morocco to make Last Temptation of Christ. But we always thought he was funny. You know, Amy knew him from Mean Streets, and we knew he wouldn't be thought of as being a comedy guy, especially after Nobody Laughing through King of Comedy. But we thought he was really right for this. So we sent him the script. But he was shooting, and we never heard back. We kind of just forgot about it. We then went to a movie theater, and there was a short before the movie. And the short was so brilliant, so visually incredible. We got to find out who made that, and that's who we want for After Hours. And it was Tim Burton. And we went to meet him, and he was an animator, like one of 30 desks at Disney. And he was this, you know, really sweet, you know, still his hair all over the place, and pens all here with ink stains on his shirt. But you could tell he was brilliant.
Yeah.
You just knew. And so he loved the script, and couldn't believe that these people just came up to him. But you could tell he was ready to do something about it. And somewhere before it really started to pick up, Marty's movie, Last Temptation of Christ, is shut down. And then everybody sent home. And it was like the studio just said enough, you know, and that's how bad his career was in at that time. And so he's flying back from Morocco in the plane, and our script is at the top of his pile. And he reads it, and as soon as he lands, he says, "This is it, I'd love to make this movie." So we went, oh my God, what are we going to tell Tim? How do we do this? Should we do this? We hadn't made deals or all that stuff, but we were, had made a commitment. So we said to Tim, life. Oh, it's so funny. We sent this to Scorsese, before you. And anyway, he likes it and said he wanted to do it. So, but and he goes, wait. Did you say Martin Scorsese wants to make this movie? I said, yes. He goes, well, I graciously bow out. I don't want to do anything that would be in any way in Scorsese's way. And he really meant it. It was like he didn't want to even talk about it. It was like done. And we worked on something else later on, so it was no bad feeling, and incredibly, gracious of him. But we also knew we didn't have to worry about Tim. We just knew he'd be fine.
Yeah.
And indeed he was.
But were you always set to take the role?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amy was at the Sundance Writers Lab, and there was a Serbian director named Dusan Makavejev, and he had an assistant named Joe Minion. And Dusan says to Amy, "You should read this boy's script. It's pretty good." And Amy loved it, and then sent it to me, and it caused such. I loved it, but and I related so strongly to it that I had to read it standing up, and because it made me so anxious, I would turn the pages with my big toe. I go, "Oh my God! Oh!" As one terrible thing happened to the other, and I was going to play that part. And so when we met Marty, when he came back from Tangier, he also assumed I was playing that part, because it hadn't been brought up, and I was kind of dreading and kind of expecting, him to tell me how great De Niro would be in this role. But it never came up.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine De Niro in it exactly.
Well, they'd done everything together, so it was hard to imagine him working without De Niro.
Right, that's true too, yeah. But it's also interesting, it's kind of a time capsule, I think, of New York in the 80s. I mean, there's a few movies like that were around that time, but it just seems somehow more definitive of
Yeah, no, every time sometimes my friends' kids see the movie and they go, "Why didn't you just use your cell phone?"
It couldn't happen now.
Yeah, no, it couldn't happen. In fact, I just recently moved downtown from the village to Tribeca, and the first week I was there, I was talking on the phone out the window. I was looking out the window, and I went, "Oh my God, I live right across the street from Kiki's apartment." And it's changed so much, this neighborhood. I mean, it's unrecognizable. I mean, the buildings are pretty much there, but it was very accurate for the time. It was so deserted and so quiet. I mean, you could hear the rats' feet, on the cobblestones, and we would shoot, and there would just be like no one around. So, now it's like, on Saturdays, it's the major shopping district, and you can't move. It's like Hong
It's also
Kong.
like tons of celebrities around there too.
Oh yeah,
where you can most likely see somebody.
I would imagine.
with
Yeah.
the
No,
proxy running around,
that's true.
Yeah. Was the shoot very difficult at all? I mean, it seemed like it could have gotten complicated.
Well, because I was the producer and the actor, I loved the acting so much, I never wanted to think about the producing. That was Amy's job. And it was, we were on schedule. You know, Marty knew he had to prove he could make a movie this small in order to go back to making movies, other movies. And we introduced him to Michael Ballhaus, who shot Baby It's You for us and ended up shooting so many of Marty's other movies. The costume designers and all the people. There was then a union called NABIT, which was a low-budget union that we'd worked with before, and we used pretty much the same crew. You know, my cousin was the first key grip on it, and he went on to do great movies as well. And so it was a very tight-knit group of people who already knew each other, and Marty was really impressed with this crew. And it was very efficient. And he also storyboarded the whole script so that when we would have, and I've still never seen this done since, on the call sheet would be the actual shots that we would be doing that day. So everybody was so prepared. And so that we had time to actually shoot the movie, you know? And so Amy once came to my trailer and she said, listen, you gotta be the producer here, you gotta help me with this, because it's going, I said, what's wrong? We're not over budget. He goes, no, the problem is this. We're shooting too much film. I said, oh. And we're shooting too much film of me. Well, yeah, but it's very expensive. I said, you want me to tell Marty to stop shooting so much of me? Really? You think I'm going to have that conversation? I don't want to have that conversation. I want him to shoot. I don't care if we go over budget on how much film we have.
Right.
So that went nowhere.
And also, some great co-stars in there. You know, Rosanna Arquette.
Yes, who I'd worked with already, and she was in Baby It's You, and we'd been in this television movie that was in Poland during the Gdansk shipyard, and the country went on strike, and we were there during then. We've continued to work. We've done many things together with them. It was John Hurd, who we'd done Chilly Scenes of Winter with, who was the star of that. And Catherine O'Hara was just starting out, but she was very big in Second City. It was a great group of people.
Yeah. But it was interesting too, like the kind of character you played. It seemed like you were cultivating a kind of persona that carried through with some other movies. How would you describe that guy?
I think a guy who's, I would say a reactive guy. A reactive. There are certain kinds of actors that were particularly good by not by what they did, but how they reacted to what they saw that made them funny. If something was, so shocking, or something that would happen to them. Things happen to usually the people I played. That would, send me down a flight of stairs, or kind of fish out of water kind of parts. I think were my niche.
Yeah, I was also saying that because Who's That Girl? You're playing kind of a wealthy guy.
Yeah.
Apple cart gets all
then
upset.
I made a nut. Yeah. And that was supposed to be on.
Kind of a screwball.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really an impossible genre to kind of do straight.
Yeah. How do you approach? I mean, how do you plug into that?
Well, I'm a big fan of screwball comedies that were made when they're made in the 30s, and I think Cary Grant, while I hardly look like Cary Grant or have that, he actually is in that reactive category as well as a comedian. In Arsenic and Old Lace, he has some of the greatest facial expressions I ever saw. And in Bringing Up Baby, it's all, the hapless guy who meets a girl who's, out of his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So, but it's kind of, by the time you know, in this day and age, you kind of can't, the audiences won't kind of accept things being out of reality. You know, it's why in films also people don't break into song the way they used to. It was a perfectly normal kind of thing, but people don't take that, you know, it's tough to break that wall, you know, and kind of break reality and just sort of give yourself into it.
Yeah, yeah. What, in Who's That Girl? I mean, what was it like at the time? I mean, Madonna was kind of at her mega star level, and you know,
it was insane. It was insane. We had to loop half the film because there were helicopters, you know, just hovering. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, the frenzy, you know, and you know, if you'd be in a car with her, you know, you'd look behind you and you'd be trailed by all these other people. It was like Sugarland Express or something, you know, just everywhere you went. But you know, she was great. She acted like this was what she imagined happening when she was a little girl, you know. So, and she always had great humor and was really funny. We got along great.
Well, it must be kind of funny because you haven't come from a world of all those people, and then she's aspiring to that, and it's like you guys
absolutely
intersect there.
Absolutely. I think that's how. So I could kind of take it in stride myself, whatever it would be, and but it was like Day of the Locusts kind of thing. I remember we were shooting in New York on a Sunday because it was the only time we could get into, I think it was Trump Plaza, and it was also happened to be on the same day as the marathon, and we were right at, we must have been, I don't know, a couple hundred yards from the finish line for the marathon, and people who were running, coming up to 26 miles, getting near the thing, would hear about the movie and veer off, and I go, the finish line is right there, just finish the race, you know. They were like dripping in sweat, going, where's Madonna, where's Madonna, you know.
I see that happen a lot in New York. Actually, you know, there's some movie thing going on.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
and people just stop what they're doing.
Well, I mean, amid all this, I mean, was there ever a push-pull between your desire to act and your desire to produce? I mean, did you have to make
it actually got to be kind of a complicated situation.
You were getting more offers at some point?
Yeah, and I was turning down really good movies.
Yeah? What were some of the... how would film history have changed?
The Fly, you know, Jeff Gold. I mean, I'll never forgive myself for that.
Well, you were maybe too much goop.
Well, you know what? My excuse was I couldn't bear to wear all that makeup.
Yeah.
But you know, here I am going, well, who cares? You know, it was just a great movie, you know. And you know, these are things you kind of learn along the way. But you know, I also but I had a partner, you know, and a commitment. And I would always hope I could do one there and do one here and do one there. And it's easier than it sounds. It's not as easy as it sounds. And you know, and also, you know, I'd be offered, you know, much more money as an actor than I would as a producer. And if I was away, you know, it was tough to balance it all. So. And my acting career, I think, was hurt by it because I was on location with Sidney Lumet doing Running on Empty at the very time I was getting offered all these things, you know, and all those cliches, strike while the iron's hot, and all that's all true, you know. So there's no such thing as striking with the iron hot necessarily as a producer, you know. So it was, you know, it was difficult to have both hats on. You know, they're two. You have to think of. One is I could think about a movie being a business, but I could never think about myself being a business. And if I did, I would have found it more of a balance. So, but it was around that time, and that I was also thinking about directing, having seen, been in the company of so many incredible directors. I went from awe to just sort of watching to feeling that if I ever got the opportunity, I'd be very comfortable doing it.
Mm. What did you learn from working with LeMay?
When you know when you know you have something and when to move on, that it's and your decision is entirely solitary, and you have to, once you do it, you don't go back. You know, maybe if you have an actor begging, fine, but you know, you really, when you see it, you see it. When you see what you need, and you don't have to waste any more time with it. Sometimes he would go so fast that you know, we as producers would actually suggest that he slow down, but he got everything he wanted. You know, and he was, and preparation. He was the most prepared director I ever saw, you know, with the actors too. That's why he shot so few takes with actors, because he had built into the schedule a rehearsal. So he would, and it would be in a space, and he would lay down, have the production designer lay down with tape the dimensions of the sets we would be going on. We get as many of the props that they would be using. So when the actors were there, they were ready to go.
Yeah. Were there other filmmakers either that you worked with directly or just admired their films that kind of infused you with a desire to direct?
Yeah, well, I mean, Landis and Scorsese made it look the most fun. I mean, they just and they were the ones that we'd have to re-loop dialogue because you could hear them laughing during the take. And you know, it's a pleasure to loop something when you crack up the director off camera. Then there's no problem. You know, and how when you see directors of that caliber who are so confident, you also then know when you're watching other directors who are pretending they're confident, or you know that because they're acting like they know what they're doing, but their eyes are kind of rolling back in their head, and everybody knows. You know, I think that one of the things that I learned, and Amy and I learned from producing, is we were the first to admit we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So if it was our first thing, we would like go, okay, you know, we would ask questions. We weren't scared of doing that because it was so unlikely that 3 kids who'd never produced a movie, and never even gotten a decent acting part, would then produce a movie for a studio that people wanted to help, you know? I think, you know, crews, they can't stand when somebody pretends they know what they're doing and doesn't take advantage of all the talent and experience that they've hired, you know? So, you know, when I first directed, if there was something I didn't know, I still am confused by, you know, crossing the line and left and right, and I'm dyslexic, you know, so it's a nightmare. And I just go, just tell it to me again, just, you know, and then okay, and then I get the picture in my head and I go, okay, got it. So you kind of have to have the balls to, you know, slow everything down so the director can understand, you know, and that's not a problem, not have it be a problem. So it's you know, that's why it's such a great job. You just sort of, you have people waiting to hear what you're going to decide, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any favorites of your or films that you're particularly proud of that you've directed?
Yes. I think I've had good luck with most of them. I'm proud of everyone. It's such work. It takes so much out of me to make a film that even the last thing I did,
the comedy.
Yeah. It was you know, that was the first job I took as a hire. That it was like and a script that I had turned down, and I kind of had to redevelop it just so that I could fall in love with it, because I literally have to. On that one, I kind of had to hallucinate how much I loved it.
Was this a movie 43 or?
No. That I did a short, and that was a very funny part of it. But that was it was Uma Thurman and Colin Firth. I'm obviously having a moment. It's one of the children I've abandoned.
You're in Sarasota, you can do that.
Yeah. But you know, the first film I made was a short. It was called Duke of Groove, and it had Uma Thurman as well in that, and Tobey Maguire was his first part, and Kiefer Sutherland, and all these wonderful actors. And it was a script that I wrote, and it was like 35 minutes. It was for Showtime, and it was based on my life, kind of growing up in Hollywood, of a real party I went to that my mother took me to. Mm-hmm. That my aunt and uncle gave a party. They were very much in the counterculture, and Joan had written Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and so she, you know, they were, you know, literary giants already, and they gave a party for Tom Wolfe, who had just come out with Kool-Aid Acid Test. And at the party was...
I bet that was a party.
That was it was an incredible party. And I was 13. Mm-hmm. And Janis Joplin was going to be there. And I was so excited and nervous that... And so scared of going with my mother, because I felt that if Janis met me, she'd go, mm-hmm. you know, what are you doing later? And I go, I'm here with my mother. And I mean, I really thought like that. And so we, you know, getting ready was like, I've got love beads, and I just fretted and fretted, you know. And so I get to the, I said to the party, I said, you know, are you going to go around and say I'm your mother and your mother, you know, when you're doing this? And she goes, I'm not going to talk to you. And sure enough, as soon as we walked in, she split. Mm-hmm. And so I wandered around the party, and this is very much what the movie was and you know, a 13-year-old kid in this environment was very unusual, and people were smoking pot and a lot of acid and all this stuff, and this bald man with a Nehru jacket, sweaty bald head, and a German accent said, "Come here, boys, sit here." And he went, "You stay here, you have vibes that will protect me." I take acid. And I thought it was Colonel Klimp from Hogan's Heroes. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, wow, the Colonel, you know, I'm Hogan's Hero, my favorite show. And I don't care if he's on acid, I'm going to keep him company. But I started to get bored of him, too. He kept holding my arm like this. And he goes, do not leave. And because I kind of now wanted to go and see other parts of the party. And I pulled my arm away, and he goes, do not go. I will have you shot. And he starts screaming at me, and I run off. It wasn't Colonel Klimp. It was Otto Preminger.
Oh my God!
So I got that wrong.
Pretty close though.
Yeah. Who would have thought? And you know, so and then Janis came to the party.
Was this before or after he made Skidoo?
It was right around that time.
Which looks like it is influenced by some LSD for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that wasn't his drug.
Yeah.
And then Janis came, and then I had to go home because it was a school night. Mm. But I you know, that party made a huge influence on me. So I wrote a script about it, and you know, that's what started. That was the first time I was on a set and as a director, and I felt so at home. I never felt so at home. Mm-hmm. And Kate Capshaw was the mother, and she just got it so completely. And she read the script and she said, I really want to do this. But I have to just run this by my husband, you know, and it was Steven Spielberg. I said, okay. And so Steven reads the script, and he says to her, do you know Griffin? He goes, oh, well, you know, I met him, you know, we met him. But you don't know him, no. know him? Like, have you ever hung out with him? Did you know him before me? And he goes, no. She goes, how come he knows you so well? This is exactly how you talk.
Wow.
And that was just a coincidence. And then it was, and one of the kind of great things, my dad came to the set, and he was, by now he was, become a writer and was doing very well, and was a best-selling novelist, and he was just bursting with pride when he came to the set. And I was putting together a huge scene with a crane, and I had about 300 extras, all these big hippies everywhere, and then Spielberg came to the set too, and the two of them are standing there watching, and Dad tells this, I kind of don't remember it, but the crew is also going, oh, Spielberg's here, Spielberg, and I see Dad and Spielberg there, and I'm doing this, and I'm walking back, and I went, oh, hey, I can't talk. I'll talk to you later. And Dad goes, that was like my favorite moment. It was like, and then Steven just watched you, and he went, he seems awfully comfortable for his first movie. So it was like,
that's great.
It was great.
But your relationship with your father, I mean, as he kind of rebuilt his life, and how was that? I mean, what resonated out of that?
Well,
in your work,
it was, as I said, it made a big impression on me that Hollywood could really destroy him. That's not true. He destroyed himself, and Hollywood jumped on the bandwagon. And he was a very different person from when I was growing up as a kid who was given all the parties.
Yeah.
To the man he became, and he by that, when he came to New York, he'd already lived in Oregon. He'd already written a book. He didn't have any money particularly, but he had an apartment that was about the size of this stage. It was like one room. It was smaller than any apartment I'd had since I'd lived in New York. And he didn't complain at all. He just stayed in this apartment. He loved his apartment. And he actually said, look at what and I was like, wow, I could not believe the difference in him. I've always been like living in the Village and all that kind of stuff. I very romanticized the Village and the Paul Simon song of, with the whores off 7th Avenue and all that kind of, and the poets and beats and everything. And so I was like these Village characters I'd see around, but I didn't know them, and then I'd sat outside in the outdoor cafe after Dad had been in New York for a couple of months, and these like Bukowski people and drag queens with hairnets would go, hey, Dominic, hey, and I go, how do you know all these people, these Damon Runyon types? I've been trying to know them my whole life. And he goes, I know him from the rooms, and he was going to AA every day, and these were all these people. And I thought, God, Dad, knowing, a drag queen like that, or the gravelly voiced, guy over there, all these people, that wouldn't have been him 10 years ago. He wouldn't be caught dead with that. And so it was an experience that I thought I'd like to kind of learn as much to have that much growth. I just don't want to go down as far to come up that high, because he paid an enormous price. And it was, but it was, he also enjoyed it. He enjoyed being famous. He enjoyed.
It was fascinating that someone could be at one plateau and then crash and then come back even higher.
Yeah, much higher.
Yeah, which is
and end up writing about and being invited to the very the houses of the very people who set out to destroy him.
But now it's kind of a critical observer in a way.
Absolutely. Now they're
most fascinating.
Yeah, and also he's not scared of them.
Yeah.
So and he'll write about anybody. He pisses them off.
Does the, do you think there's a certain amount of like genetic talent that you're born with? I mean, with you have all these literary people in your family.
Yeah, I do. I do. I think my sister was an actress, and she would have been, had she not been killed, would have been, I think, a really great actress, really like extraordinary actress. My brother's very creative growing up, and decided, not to pursue that, and got more into teaching. He had he wanted nothing to do with show business, and openly, like, moved out, and he lived like a monk, and taught, very difficult children from really tough backgrounds. And but I think, I think we're all drawn to that. There wasn't, one banker or mathematician in the family for generations.
Did you get to spend a lot of time with your aunt growing up? I mean,
Yeah.
Was there a lot to take from that? She was always very influential. I mean, as a journalist, I mean, in college, like, all her books were on the syllabus.
Well, I was particularly close with John. I had we would talk on the phone, most mornings when I was in New York. He was not close with my father. The two of them really didn't like each other at all until the very end of their lives. And so I was sort of the go-between between the two of them. But I whenever you talk to one, if I talked to John on the phone, he'd always go, and he'd do this with everyone. Joan, pick up. And you get both of them on the phone. I think, I'm kind of one of the few people left of the Dunnes, so she and I have become particularly close in the past. And she's letting me make a documentary about her, which I've started shooting, and I'm going to go back and do.
No, that's great.
And it'll be about her life and her work, and her extraordinary marriage and her extraordinary loss. And I'm so grateful she's going to let me do that. It's very, she wouldn't normally.
That's something to look forward to. What kind of seems like you've had a real flurry of activity in the last few years, and getting back into acting more frequently. Obviously, The Discoverers is here. Was there something that precipitated that, or?
Yeah, I think my focus as a producer director has gone much more into television. I kind of the things that I've wanted to make as a director, I've had really tough time setting up. I'll get it to a certain thing, and then either the cast won't be ready when the money is, and vice versa. A million things, each problem. So I've been putting my energy into that, into working in television, and also directing. I direct Good Wives, the show The Good Wife, and stuff like that. And but kind of in that period, I've always thought, wait a minute, while I'm waiting, instead of driving myself crazy, I am an actor. I can, so much, the money, people getting paid these days is insane, how bad it's become. And you can work for years and years on something and actually have no money come in for it, and the math sort of doesn't work. So I thought I can do that, and also help myself. And then I read that script of The Discoverers. I thought the part was so wonderful, and it got me really excited about acting, and it's done very well for like my reputation, and so I've been able to act quite a bit lately. And
it's a great character. It's this kind of beaten down college professor who, on the eve of taking his kids on this Lewis and Clark reenactment journey, the mother dies, and then you've got to take your father with you.
My father's Stuart Margolin plays him, and he's kind of looks like he has some sort of dementia, and he is still in his furs, and he has a musket, and he's kind of nuts. And I have to take him along this journey across the country. And we're all with Lewis and Clark reenactors, you know, and it's sweet. It's funny and I think touching.
Yeah, and the kids are kind of like a little cynical.
Quite cynical. A little older.
You got to
than
work
their
really
years.
hard. But it's a great character because, you know, this is a guy who has to kind of reinvent himself there. And,
Yeah.
and it also seems like kind of a natural extension of some of the guys you played in the 80s if they had kept
I
going
agree.
along, you know.
Yeah,
like,
no, it's true.
Yeah.
It is true. It's, you know, somebody dealing with a lot of weight, pressure, and, you know, kind of coming out the other side of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've worked on some really interesting stuff coming up. There's this Blood Ties looks really interesting. It's like
Oh,
this,
yeah.
Brooklyn.
I wish I could say I have a bigger part in
yeah.
that. That was the director.
It's a French guy.
Guillaume Canadet. I did that movie last night with Keira Knightley, and he was in it, and we became great pals. And so that was one of those, please play this part.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the few laughs in the movie. It's real dark, you know.
1970s,
1970s,
Brooklyn Mafia
you know,
type thing.
right.
Yeah. The cast is
amazing.
Insane.
Yeah.
So like when you're on a movie like that, I mean, does everyone end up, you know, going out to the bar afterwards and hanging out, or you're just kind of in there for a day or two? I think people have
not so much during the a lot before and a lot after.
Yeah.
But not so much during. It used to be a lot during, and maybe it does, and maybe people do that behind my back now. But I don't get a sense of as much partying and bad behavior.
Yeah. I just mean like,
now.
but just, you know.
No,
so
I know what you mean.
yeah,
I know
yeah.
what you mean. The camaraderie. I not as much as you would think, and as much as I remember. I think people people are much more conscious about, you know, getting their sleep and being their profession, and there's and also a lot of people have kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so there's not a lot of time. People seem to have, you know, their life outside of the movies and their life during the movies, you know, and a lot of people don't mix them.
Back to the TV question here. It is interesting that television and cable seem to have all the real quality projects now.
Yeah,
so there's no longer this middle ground where, I mean, maybe in the fall there's like a dozen Oscar movies that come out
Right.
that have sort of sophisticated adult themes, and the rest of the time it's you know shows like The Good Wife. I mean, the casting is so stellar.
Greatest actors in New York. Right
You know, various cable networks. I mean, that seems like you found a really good fit.
Well,
with that.
yeah, I think that you know, I've always loved adapting books too. That, and there's something about a series in particular, or a limited series, that you can really tell a story.
Yeah.
You know, and really let it play out and go off on tangents, and you know, which is what a great novel is. You know, I love being lost in a novel, and you know, they'll pass the flower vendor, and then all of a sudden we're going into the flower vendor's life, and off that goes, and then they figure out a way to bring it back, you know, and I love that kind of structure, and television, you know, lends itself to that. So there's a series that with this writer I work with that's at BBC, BBC America, that we're very close to
Blood on the
making.
Tracks.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Great title, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I wonder where, I can't say I thought of it. I didn't think of that, or Visions of Johanna.
Right,
titles,
right.
But that's the name of the writer's column.
Oh, okay. So what is the story of it?
This story is about it's about a journalist, in this case an English journalist, because it's for the BBC, who is in his late 40s and married, divorced rather, and he writes for a crime magazine. And he is a kind of a journalist, a crime journalist, without a trace of perspective, and has only bias in what he's writing. He writes as a supporter for the victim of the crime, of the murder that took place, so strongly that the people involved with it end up are very powerful people, and he gets himself into a lot of trouble.
Was somewhat inspired by your father?
Quite,
I think? Yeah.
quite. I'm just going to see if you can pick that up. And you know, and he was, you know, quite, as I said, quite fearless, and
Yeah.
and you know, had quite a collection of very powerful enemies, and you know, got death threats and all sorts of stuff happened, and you know, I've been approached many times with like these Dominic Dunne sort of figures before, but this guy, Steve Crystal, was the first one who really understood it, and you know, my father's he was just too unique a character to not, you know, take advantage of, and I think he'd be very, you know, if it goes, I think he'd be very pleased with this immortalization.
Cast anything yet, or are you just waiting for your?
No, we got to wait for the green light.
I think we can open it up to cute questions. Got about 10 minutes or so.
How come I was named Griffin? It's my mother's maiden name, and I was actually christened Thomas Griffin Dunne. My grandfather's name was Thomas Griffin, and I don't know why, but there was never a moment I wasn't called Griffin. They just stuck with the middle name. Yeah, I do. I mean, I do. It's kind of hard to imagine not being attracted to, you know, to art. Well, I can't wrap my brain around what not being in some way.
Someone back there.
Oh, yes. Okay. There's a local resident here named Bob Plunkett, and Bob Plunkett is Amy Robinson, my partner's oldest friend. And we introduced him to Scorsese, and Scorsese immediately wanted to cast him. He'd never acted before. Maybe he had in college or something, but immediately wanted to cast him as the guy, that gay guy who picks me up on the street, who brings me back. I go back to his apartment, and I had that monologue about, you're not going to believe what happened to me.
Yeah.
And he's got that, you know, face. And it was so funny. It was one of the funniest days I ever spent on the set. And one of the other things I learned from Scorsese about directing it that I try to do is when you have the camera on somebody else and it's their close-up, you don't have to stick to the dialogue for off-camera. So, you know, you can really mess some people up off-camera and get some interesting looks on their faces in the editing room. So I would do this to Bob, tell him, and then when it came to my close-up, Amy and Marty had told Bob all these really personal things about me. And so he just went into that, and it was like really weird. And so I saw Bob just the other night when I first arrived here, and you know, he's as funny as ever.
Yes, you are.
Well, technology has actually made the filmmaking much easier on just about every level. It's certainly more accessible to other people, to many more people than ever before, to make movies. You know, it's simpler. You can get incredible, you know, equipment. It's not necessarily cheaper. It can be faster, but it's not hugely faster. But you can shoot a lot more. I think editorially the advances are being made are amazing, and obviously in special effects. Where it's going technically, I don't know. That's never been my strong suit. But you know, how movies are being released and will be made, and for what the audience is, I think that is still an area that people just don't know. They're scratching their heads. You know, whether it's going to be a video on demand, will people be making things just to watch in their homes, and then they'll download it and never go to the theaters except for, you know, certain kinds of franchise movies. You know, it kind of looks like it's going that way, and that it makes these film festivals all the more important because, you know, tragically, so many of these movies, there are 200 movies in this festival alone, they're not all going to get distributed. It's simply too hard and too expensive to release a movie. You know, when you take out an ad, all the ways that people used to promote movies when there was a stronger studio system would be, you know, full-page ad in the Times and a TV ad. No one can afford that unless it's one of the huge movies, the franchise-type movies. And, you know, when you take out an ad in the New York Times, they charge just as much for Batman as they do for The Discoverers. You know, there's no, you know, bargain just because you made a low-budget movie. So, you know, ways to promote and get people into the theaters, into the theater, or, you know, download, however it's going to be. I think I think most people are still trying to figure out the formula. Yeah, I saw a fantastic movie last night, the Mariel Hemingway documentary of Barbara Koppel, and somebody else had asked that question of Mariel, and but Barbara answered it, I think the best, and I've been asked that before, and this was my favorite kind of best answer, was to totally commit to doing it, not let anything get in your way. If you want to live in New York, move to New York, you know, pay for it, you know, with however you have to pay for it, you know, your acting classes or whatever you're going to do. Know it's really going to be difficult, and don't take anything for granted. You know, if you get a job and you're just starting out, do it. You know, no matter what it is, because the most exciting thing about being an unknown, that a luxury you lose much later on when you're established, is nobody gives a damn what you do when nobody knows who you are. So you can experiment, you can play, you could be terrible, you can be, you can learn right on the camera, you know, and it's not going to hurt you. People aren't going to be hoping you fail. That will happen once you get really, really good. So, you know, my daughter's an actress now, and she's just starting out, and she's always wanted to be an actress, and I've always said there's no goddamn way. And I said, you give me a couple years of college, and I'll be Mama Rose. But until then, and she did, and now she's out there doing it, and you know, and having, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who your parents are or who your grandfather, any of that stuff. Once you're in the room, you have to be good. And she is good, but even if you're good, they still are going to say, but you're not blonde, or this, or, you know, the way you lose out for parts is, again, so out of your control, and it really has very little to do with your merit. So, I mean, she's had, like, her best friend becoming successful and getting the part right down in a Noah Baumbach movie, right down to the two of them, and she gets it, you know? So it's like, and that's tough, you know? And it's like, so she's getting the hard knocks, but she still is doing it. And she's not, you know, and this is what I would say to the kid, whoever is starting out, you know, don't let yourself get bitter. You actually have to delude yourself that, you know, and to believe that it's entirely possible, no matter what gets thrown in your face. Oh, I would love to, and I quite like the Accidental Husband, by the way, is the name of the movie. That I did, a romantic comedy, was the last thing I did. But as far as the kind of quality romantic comedies, I mean, in terms of the script being really good, like Practical Magic and Addicted to Love, I would absolutely do that. But, you know, as I look at, you know, that was for, both pictures were for Warner Brothers, and they were enormously expensive. You know, it was kind of ironic that my first movie for a studio, having made as a producer so many other things for studios, this was 3 times the budget of anything I'd ever dealt with as a producer. And I don't see how the movie like that, it almost didn't help the movie. It almost would have been better if it was distributed by Miramax and have it be, cost less, because so they wouldn't make a movie like that, So anyway, but if something came along and it was a great script and it was funny and there was real heart and romance to it, I'd be thrilled. Its leading actress is, enormously appealing. She sort of she comes with an audience that doesn't realize how much they love her until they see her. They just love her, and for good reason. And the scripts are. It doesn't just focus on the legal issues. It's always a legal issue that comes out of character. So, and the character is usually about their morality being questioned. And it puts the audience in situations of thinking, gosh, what would I do if I was confronted with, representing a reprehensible person, but I'm also going broke, so I need the money, and am I selling myself out? And people in my business ask themselves that every day, and so there's in these conflicts, you don't need a law background to kind of get it on a human level. And then I think it's, and I think they also relate to, it's a very strong female following. And I think they're really fascinated with Juliana's performance as a mother, and having these two kids growing up in the internet age and being in the public eye and being a woman who was humiliated on a grand scale. I mean, who isn't more fascinated by the wives that stand next to the shamed politician than the politician himself? It's like, why is she standing there? What's going on in that family? Well, with anything, it's going to be not so much where you are in your career. It'll be what's on the page, and if it's really good, whoever the person in Los Angeles is. Good scripts have a way of getting out there. There's even something called the blacklist.
The blacklist, yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
The top 10 unpublished.
The top 10 unproduced scripts, and they're written by people who they're not seasoned Los Angeles screenwriters who've been doing it so long they get to be bitter. They're they're just people who wrote something that they're trying to get out,
yeah.
and I do think no matter what quality work in any of these fields will find its way. Mm-hmm. It's not all Vincent van Gogh problems. Yeah, it's always hard to get money, and it's also very hard to get the money that you really need, and so. Everybody is taking a hit. Everybody wants to work so badly, and be active and be relevant and doing this, that the people who actually have the money are taking advantage of the hunger and desire of the talent out there, and so you'll have really big writers working for a lot less money than they used to, and everybody is taking cuts because the projects are fewer, and the sources of money can get tougher and tougher. And so when it comes time to making deals, outside of the really big names who are proven to bring in an audience, pretty much everyone else is going to be subject to. It's incredible the amount of actors that are working for scale now. In independent movies, I don't know many. Most movies, actors are getting scale in independent filmmaking. There's no breadwinner. There's no. That's just how it's going. It's.
I saw this new kind of micro-budget film with Jane Addams that she collaborated with this guy Joe Swanberg, mm-hmm. called All the Light in the Sky, and she plays an actress not unlike Jane Addams, who's mm-hmm. gets passed over for the money role, but then, but we've got this really great little indie film. You'll have to do it for free, but
that's true.
And she's
I'm
like
here
really happy to take it.
I know. I'm here with Mickey Sumner, who's in Frances Ha. She's playing tonight. It's a wonderful movie. You get a chance.
Great.
And here she is on this, and she's with her manager, who I know as well. And we've been spending a lot of time these past few days. And she was, the manager gets phone calls of like offers and inquiries, and they're from really well-known people. And it's like, it's kind of her time. There's like, so what's the money? Well, it's $100 a day. That's what extras get. That's what the guy who stands, in the office building and with the messenger thing drops it off and goes. But that's what they're offering stars.
Wow.
I mean, but it's going to be taken seriously because if it's a wonderful director and, it's an investment. But, it's becoming more the norm.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful. You got to do about 30 in a year to pay the rent.
I know people who do that.
Yeah, and the people do that. I'd say the greatest example of directing and acting in your own movie is Reds, that Warren Beatty did. And I look at that like trying to understand, quantum physics. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he did that. It is so deeply impressive to be that good. And and I've read Ben Affleck was saying he's got a very strong partner that he really trusts who will look at the takes. And he'll also move on if he might not think he was that great, but it was the other person was really great. So there's a certain selflessness. But I have never done that. I'd like to think I could, but it scares me. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more? Or
No, good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great.